Nat Turner, Elijah Carter, Sarah Whitfield. In the dead of night they vanished, children, farmers, ministers, leaving behind only whispers of blood and fire. What happened in the heart of Virginia was no accident. It was a reckoning no one was ever meant to witness. The sun set over the rolling fields of Virginia, casting long shadows across the tobacco-stained earth. A farmhouse stood at the edge of the county, silent but for the creak of an old swing. It was here that the first whispers began, children disappearing, their screams swallowed by the thick summer heat. No trace was ever found. Locals spoke in hushed tones of a shadow moving between the swaying cornstalks, a figure whose eyes glimmered with unnatural knowledge. Farmers claimed livestock were found mutilated in patterns too precise to be random, too cruel to be sane. They called him Nat Turner, the name given to a man no one truly understood, a man who seemed to slip through time itself. And yet the truth was far darker than rumor. This was not merely a man, it was a force, a vessel of a suppressed terror birthed from generations of pain and silence. A terror that would soon descend upon the South in a way no preacher, sheriff, or plantation owner could imagine. Nat Turner was said to be born under an eclipse, a celestial omen marking him as different. His mother whispered of dreams where ancestors bled into his vision. Spectral faces pressed against the walls of their cabin, warning, pleading, demanding obedience. In the night, Nat would wake drenched in sweat, murmuring in languages no one else spoke. The elders believed the boy saw beyond the veil of life, into the marrow of human cruelty. He absorbed the beatings, the insults, the daily humiliation, but it festered inside him, feeding a storm that no one could touch. Churches once sacred became theaters of deception. Congregants spoke of sermons that led to strange faintings and hysteria, as if the very word of God were twisted to awaken ancient guilt. And in the orphanages of the county, children reported nightmares of fire, blood, and chained ancestors whispering secrets they could not understand. Nat Turner became an instrument of history, but history itself had been bent, corrupted, its truth hidden in plain sight. It began with a scream. One night, the sky torn by a storm, Nat appeared at the edge of a small plantation alone, carrying an instrument that glinted in the lightning. By dawn, 55 bodies lay scattered across the fields, their positions grotesque, ritualistic, almost symbolic. Every witness spoke of the fear in his eyes, a calm, deliberate fire. No plea, no mercy, only the cold execution of something older, something human and inhuman all at once. Families who had sheltered secrets for decades were exposed. Confessions spilled like poisoned water from mouths long sealed. Some survivors claimed that Turner did not merely kill, he made them see their sins, their complicity, and the blood that had always bound them. By the time the sun rose, the county itself seemed to tremble, its people haunted by the idea that the very soil was soaked with memory and vengeance. The white steeples of Virginia's churches had long masked their rot with hymns and solemn faces. Nat's attacks were not random. They targeted the moral arbiters, the ministers who had twisted scripture to justify chains. Inside candle-lit sanctuaries, parishioners began to speak of shadowy forms slithering along the pews, of whispered chants in the dead language of old Europe. One preacher, found trembling in his study, confessed that he had buried a ledger of horrors. Children sold, women coerced, sins unspoken. Turner's path was a message etched in blood, declaring that institutional authority was a lie, that sacred walls could not contain the truths they had hidden. Each night he prowled, invisible yet omnipresent, a living accusation. And behind every locked door the townsfolk felt the creeping sensation that they were being watched, not by a man, but by history itself, hungry for reckoning. Beyond the town, an old brick orphanage held more than children. Sisters whispered of rooms locked for decades, of cries muffled in the walls. Nat Turner's visits were silent at first. Doors creaked open without a hand. Shadows moved where none should exist. He seemed drawn to the forgotten, the hidden, the children whose innocence had been violated by neglect or worse. In their nightmares he appeared not as a man but as a shape of fire and ash, tracing the sins of their caretakers across their skin with spectral fingers. By the time the authorities arrived, the children were silent, trembling, eyes wide with knowledge no one should bear. Those who questioned them heard only whispers of a man who could see the truth of their suffering, who could name the horrors without mercy. Turner became less of a killer and more of a reckoning, a reflection of all the concealed corruption festering in the county. News spread, but the truth was fragmented. Some said Turner had no face, some that he was a local farmhand driven mad. The town itself fractured under the weight of guilt and terror. Houses once pristine were found with hidden rooms, charred journals, and bones buried beneath floorboards. Families whispered of ancestors who trafficked in secret horrors, of deals struck in candlelight with blood-soaked hands. Turner's presence revealed the town's underside, a layer of violence and exploitation carefully obscured by polite society. At night, children would vanish only to reappear speaking in tongues, recounting memories that were not their own. Adults felt it too, a creeping paranoia, the sense that walls had ears and that history itself was hunting them. Turner had awakened something dormant, a force that existed beyond the living, feeding on shame and secrecy. A nearby seminary became another theater of horror. Scholars obsessed with doctrine had conducted rituals long forgotten, trying to bridge heaven and earth. Nat Turner, drawn by an invisible compass, entered one night. Candles burned blue. Texts were scorched as if by invisible hands, and every student awoke with faces of the dead pressed to their windows. By dawn, the lead scholar had vanished, leaving only a diary filled with fragmented confessions and bizarre diagrams. Turner moved not with violence but with inevitability, a shadow judgment of the institutions that claimed morality, yet thrived on exploitation. Here, he was less man than manifestation, a reminder that knowledge without conscience invites horrors that cannot be contained. The plantations burned, not by accident but with the precision of someone who knew the land like the lines on his palms. Crops were left untouched, livestock spared. The fire targeted homes of those who had hidden violence behind family walls. Turner's march was a choreography of retribution, a reminder that history's sins would not remain buried. Smoke rose like black fingers clawing at the sky. The air was thick with the scent of ash and betrayal, carrying whispers of ancestors, their voices demanding acknowledgement. Townsfolk reported hearing his laughter, low and unnatural, rolling across the hills with a cadence that chilled the bone. It was not fear that gripped them, it was a profound, existential dread, the understanding that they had always been complicit in something far greater than themselves. When captured, Turner's cell became a crucible of terror. Guards spoke of shadowed movements, of chains rattling without hands. His eyes, once human, reflected the suffering of centuries. Visitors fainted or screamed, claiming he whispered names from beyond the grave, demanding justice. Even in confinement, his presence fractured minds, revealing truths no sane person could endure. Dreams became premonitions. Townsfolk saw their ancestors' sins replayed with unforgiving clarity, their own hands stained with blood they never shed. The jailhouse meant to contain him, instead became a portal for the horrors Turner carried, the echoes of a suppressed history clawing back into the living world. A diary surfaced decades later, its pages brittle with age. Written in a sprawling, almost alien script, it recounted visions, blood rituals, and suppressed injustices across generations. Turner had meticulously documented the sins of his captors, of the town, of the institutions that claimed piety while hiding atrocities. Each entry radiated a sense of inevitability, as if every act of violence had been preordained by the invisible architecture of corruption. Those who read it felt an uncanny understanding, a knowing that truth and horror are inseparable, and that sometimes history needs a monstrous vessel to expose the rot at its core. Even months later, townsfolk avoided the old church where Turner's wrath had visited. The pews bore faint scorch marks, Symbols burned into the wood as though by firelight that no one saw. On the stone steps, rust-colored stains appeared after every rainfall, like the land itself refused to forget. Children whispered of seeing a man standing silently in the shadows of the steeple, his eyes reflecting centuries of pain. Priests who dared to enter reported hearing hollow whispers of guilt, each confession doubling as a curse. Turner had become less man, more memory, an embodiment of every hidden sin in the county, a reminder that injustice cannot be buried beneath sermons or stained glass. The surviving orphans, now teenagers, began to speak in voices not their own, chanting names of long-dead masters and mistresses, their words forming rhymes of vengeance and reckoning. Scholars and clergy alike dismissed it as hysteria, yet every account matched precisely the names and deeds found in Turner's lost diary. Some children drew maps of places no one remembered, describing cellars and hidden rooms brimming with bones. Each revelation pulled the town deeper into paranoia, as if the veil between past and present had been pierced, and Turner's shadow lingered in every corner. A widow whose husband had profited from the slave trade reported nightly visions of Turner standing at the edge of her bed, eyes glowing in the moonlight. He whispered the names of every wronged soul, promising reckoning. Her house became uninhabitable. Doors slammed on their own. Whispers rose from the floorboards, and portraits seemed to shift, reflecting horrors that had taken place centuries earlier. Neighbors claimed they heard the widow screaming in a language they did not recognize, a language of accusation and memory that tore at the mind. The seminary had long been a place of learning, yet Turner's influence left it haunted. Candles flickered in hallways where no wind blew. Students reported dreams in which ancestors' eyes gleamed from paintings, silently judging every decision. Scholars found themselves writing confessions in the margins of sacred texts, unable to resist the force guiding their hands. Turner was no longer just present. He was everywhere, a psychic imprint of justice and vengeance folded into the very bricks and mortar of the institution. Entire families disappeared without trace, leaving behind only locked doors and cryptic messages scrawled in chalk. The past remembers. No search parties ever found them. The only clue was an overwhelming sense of guilt and shame lingering in their abandoned homes. Locals whispered that Turner had not killed them, but absorbed them into some otherworldly ledger, making them witnesses to their ancestors' crimes for eternity. Every disappearance was a mirror, reflecting the town's sins back upon itself, impossible to ignore. Years after the initial rampage, the fields where Turner had walked refused to grow. Crops wilted, livestock avoided the area, and wild animals fled. Those who dared to work the land at night reported a figure in the distance, watching silently, unmoving yet omnipresent. They swore the air grew cold as he approached, a chill that penetrated bone and memory. The soil seemed soaked with centuries of injustice, fertile not for crops, but for the echoes of ancestral blood and pain. On stormy nights, candles flickered, in abandoned homes revealing Turner standing silently, holding the diaries, watching. Those who glimpsed him spoke of a calm so profound it was terrifying, a knowledge so complete it rendered their very souls bare. Every secret, every suppressed sin, and every lie ever uttered in the county seemed to converge on him. He became a dark arbiter, a spectral judge moving between the living and the dead with terrifying precision. Old houses revealed new horrors. Voices whispered from the walls, recounting every hidden transaction, every broken child, every stolen inheritance. Nat Turner's essence had fused with the town itself. To live there was to be constantly confronted with the sins that had been normalized, buried, and ignored. Even the wind seemed to carry warnings, rustling leaves in patterns that spelled out names in a language older than the land itself. In a final act, Turner's ledger resurfaced, revealing truths too dark to speak aloud. Names, dates, rituals, and confessions spanned decades, documenting horrors hidden under the guise of religion, family, and civility. Anyone who read it reported seeing figures in the corner of their vision, feeling breath on their necks and hearing footsteps echo where none existed. The town's past became a living horror, a lesson in the inevitability of justice when crimes remain unacknowledged. Nat Turner vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving behind only echoes. Yet his presence lingered, a mythic shadow intertwined with the land, the churches, the orphanages, and the townsfolk's minds. Families continued to whisper his name in fear and reverence, knowing that while he was gone, the reckoning he embodied would never truly leave. History, when suppressed, becomes a force of terror. Turner had become both ghost and judge, a warning etched into the soul of Virginia, that hidden sins, unacknowledged horrors, and ancient traumas will rise again, unstoppable, merciless, eternal.